I am completely and utterly spent by the time the dance ends. As daylight begins to break in the distance, Hieronymous ushers the rest of the students back to their dorms as I slump against the wall and wait. When the last student has gone from the gym, Hieronymous takes my hand in his and leads us back to his room. "Oh," I tease him, "aren't you afraid someone is going to catch us holding hands?" "Let them see," Hieronymous replies with a shrug. I believe most students are too tired to pay our affairs much mind anyhow. We walk back the rest of the way to his room, where Hieronymous pushes me into the bathroom and tells me to shower first. I do, but it's difficult. My body is so tired that even just lifting the bottle of shampoo feels like it takes considerable effort. "Are you finished yet?" Hieronymous asks, and I'm suddenly aware that he's outside the curtain. "Uh-huh," I reply sleepily, but make no move to get out of the warm stream of water. Suddenly, the curtain moves aside, and I realize Hieronymous has come into the shower with me. This gets my attention. Hieronymous and I had never really showered together before. He said that the shower was one place where he knew he was guaranteed peace and privacy, and so I agreed that I'd never barge in on him when he was in the shower. Apparently, the same didn't hold true for me. "This is a special occasion," Hieronymous says, as if reading my thoughts. He gently pulls me out of the stream of water while he begins to shower quickly, not paying any attention to me. It's cold outside the stream of water, and I can't help but cuddle closer to him, not wanting to get in his way, but desperate to feel the warmth of his body heat. "Just a few more minutes and then you'll be off to bed," Hieronymous says suddenly. Amazing how someone as young as yourself can't seem to stay awake. "Do you realize how hard I came earlier?" I ask him. "I need to be cuddled." Hieronymous seems surprised by my candor, but says nothing as he turns off the water. He hops out of the shower, but instead of grabbing a towel, he uses a quick spell to dry us both off. I fluff my hair up behind me with one hand as he picks me up, carrying me over to the bed as he plops me down. "Sleep time?" I ask him as he pulls the covers over me. "Yes, Tori, time to sleep," he says as he gets into bed beside me. I start to say something else, but my words slur into one incomprehensible jumble as I finally drift off to sleep. Hieronymous falls asleep quickly, but is surprised to find himself awake just a few short hours later. He was often awake early, and it shouldn't have surprised him that his body would respond so readily to a decade-long habit. He glanced over at Tori, who was out. She was often restless in her sleep, stirring and mumbling, but now she was silent and still. If not for the steady rise and fall of her chest, he was almost afraid that she had completely stopped breathing. They were supposed to talk today. She was finally going to open up and explain to him what had been bothering her over these past few weeks. He could find out on his own, of course, but he wanted Tori to stop and explain it to him herself. That being said, what if she couldn't? What if her silence wasn't because she didn't trust him, but because she had inadvertently made a vow promising not to tell? That would be one of the worst case scenarios if he could ever think of one, but he couldn't deny that it was possible. Moving as slowly as he could so as not to wake her, Hieronymous slipped out of bed. He was still exhausted, but this concerned Tori, and when it came to her, he could never sit idle. He was ready to put every last piece of himself into this relationship, but he would never be able to fully understand Tori until he had a clearer picture of what was going on. Once dressed, he heads over to Potsdam's office. He wasn't surprised to see her awake this early, but she seemed surprised to see him. "Why, Hieronymous, I didn't expect you awake so soon. The rest of the dance went smoothly, I hope?" "No further incidents," he replies. Suddenly he seems a bit unsure of what he's doing there. Surely asking Potsdam what was wrong would be a clear sign that Tori didn't trust him. But at the same time, what if she couldn't tell him? He needed more details, and those he could only get from Potsdam. I'm concerned about Tori, he says at length, and Potsdam's eyebrows shoot up in surprise. The other night, when you brought her home, I want to know more about what you two discussed. Oh? Potsdam asked. For the first time in a long time, she was downright guarded. Potsdam, who claimed to know everything about everyone, didn't expect this inquiry. That wasn't a good sign. What did she tell you? Potsdam asks at length. I'm more interested in what you told her, Hieronymous replies. And once you tell me what information she's shared, I can elaborate, Potsdam says quickly. Then it seems we're at an impasse. Hieronymous crosses his arms over his chest. I won't tell you what she shared until you tell me what you've told her, and you won't share anything until I explain what she's divulged. Potsdam just smiles as she shakes her head. There's no need to be difficult, Hieronymous. Tori and I touched on many subjects that night. I am simply trying to determine context. Hieronymous folds and unfolds his arms over his chest again and says nothing. If you won't say anything, I can then only presume that it's because you have nothing to say. She hasn't told you anything. And I need to know why, Hieronymous snaps suddenly. I need to know if you made her promise anything that would make her reticent to divulge any information. Potsdam just laughs as she shakes her head, but he still can't get the distinct impression that she's nervous. She had been up all night, and she was clearly off her game. I would never run that risk, I can assure you of that, she says. Now, if she happened to make promises to other interested parties, that would be beyond the scope of my knowledge. Who else would she have made a promise to? He asks. All of her friends were smart enough never to make Tori promise anything, and besides, this was something about them. Her friends may have had some details about their relationship, but he had already learned that when it came to the important details, Tori was as private as he was. So if she didn't make a promise to Potsdam, and she didn't make a promise to her friends, who was left? He suddenly remembered that he had spied on Tori reading up on British nobility in the library more and more lately, and he almost couldn't believe he couldn't have put two and two together sooner. I need to know what she discussed with my father, he says after a few moments, and Potsdam smiles. It wasn't too hard to put together, now was it? Potsdam asks. Unfortunately, I was not there for their meeting, so I don't know the specifics of what they discussed. But you allowed him on campus? Hieronymous thunders. You know the power he possesses, and you also know that he has already kidnapped Tori once before. Why would you risk her safety a second time? Oh, come now. You know how little interest he has in visiting this institution, Potsdam says with a roll of her eyes. He just wanted to apologize to her for their previous interaction. He did so, and see, Tori is fine. She probably didn't mention it because she thought it wasn't worth mentioning. His father sought her out off school grounds in order to simply apologize and walk away. That was as unbelievable as Tori keeping something like that to herself. I'm tired of these games, Hieronymous snapped suddenly. I know you're deep in my father's pocket now, and I don't know what he's promised you, but how much longer do you think you can ride this out? He wants me to take over his seat. Potsdam smiles, although she seems a bit unsure. I'm aware. So do you think he intends to fulfill whatever promises he's made to you? He demands. No, he'll leave that up to me. And do you think I would be so inclined to help you in your moment of need when you mock me in mine? Potsdam seems as though she's considering this for a moment. You do have a point, Hieronymous. In that case, I will leave you with a warning. It's obvious how Tori feels about you. She's young, and she's weak, and she's in a prime position to be manipulated. She has no goals, no ambition, nothing except to live out whatever fairy tale life she's concocted in her head with you. He hesitates for a moment, unable to see her point. I'm aware. So, Potsdam continues, all someone has to do is threaten to take all of that away, and what would she be left with? Tori has already died for you once, and it's clear that she would do it again if she thought she was protecting you. Hieronymous stares at her for a moment, his lips pursed. Has someone threatened me? Not to my knowledge, Potsdam replies coolly. At least, not yet, but you know it's going to happen eventually, Hieronymous, especially after you take up your father's seat. You are in a rare position that you can use your father's influence to help protect her while solidifying your own. It would be a shame to waste it. That was it. Suddenly, it all became clear to him. Maybe Tori was too young to know better, but he could tell when he was being manipulated. Just as he was Tori's weakness, Tori was his own. He would do anything, absolutely anything, to protect her and keep her safe. Although his gruff demeanor probably made most question it, Potsdam knew better. His father knew better. Wherever Tori was concerned, he was as transparent as he could possibly be. It's something to consider, he says after a moment, determined to at least try to conceal his vulnerability. I should be getting back to her. Before you go, Potsdam's voice trails off until she's sure she has his full attention. I found Tori in the gym. Far be it from me to discuss the secrets of a teenage girl, but despite what she might claim, Tori is not over the trauma of what happened to her last year. I may have divulged a few details here and there to help her process the event more clearly. He stares her down, biting his lip. The pain that Tori experienced in the gym of reliving her own death had been something she said she had inflicted on herself. But was her magic really strong enough for that? Or did Potsdam have a hand in it? He was never going to get straight answers from her. What he needed to find, he was only going to get from Tori herself. Thank you, he says tersely. Just so you remember, I'm an ally, Potsdam reminds him. If you have any doubt of that, just remember who officiated your wedding. Despite our disagreements, I'd be the last one to try to spoil your happily ever after. He contemplates this for a moment. She did have a point. She had known him for over a decade now. She had seen how much happier he was with Tori, and if he was happy, he was all the more likely to submit to whatever demands she asked of him. Duly noted, he replies, and with a sweep of his cape, heads out of her office and teleports back to his room. He opens the door and heads inside, shutting it behind him without even remembering that classes were canceled for the day, and Tori was still sound asleep within. Hey, you, she mutters sleepily as she rolls over to face him. Even though his slamming at the door must have woken her, she doesn't look annoyed. Instead, she just smiles that shy smile at him as she blinks in the morning light. He suddenly notices everything about her all at once. Round face, large eyes, blue hair, mussed about her shoulders from sleep. She looked, for lack of a better word, like an angel. He stood just in front of the doorway, just staring, all air sucked from his lips. She looked beautiful, but she always looked beautiful. This was more than that. She looked pristine, like a snowflake magnified under a microscope, unique and perfect. What? She giggles, and he can't help but blush. What is it? Her expression sobers slightly as she looks him up and down, realizing he's now fully dressed. Is everything okay? Do you have work to do? I finished while you were sleeping, he tells her quietly as he disrobes, so we can spend all weekend together, as we discussed. Tori grins up at him. No, beams up at him, as if a supernova had bloomed behind her eyes. Potsdam was right, of course. People would try to use Tori against him. They would attempt to use him against her as well. But the one thing others failed to realize was that they were a team, and as long as they stood united, their happy ending would be all but guaranteed.